This week on the show, we have a very full news roster to run down, plus an oldie but a goodie with Igor of the nginx project. You're going to want to stick around for that. That plus all your questions and feedback. Keep it tuned to BSD Now. As always, your place to be, SD. BSD Now, episode 124. Get your nginx started. Recorded January 13th, 2016. Hey, I'm your host, Chris Moore.
And I'm Alan Jude.
And we're glad to have you guys with us. It's another live week. Lots of interesting news to talk about, and some, I don't know, more interesting than others. We'll see. But we got a lot to get to today, and I guess there's no bones about it. We'll just have to get right to the big story that people have been waiting for us to comment on. But as a number of you have written to us in the past few weeks, you've asked why Alan and I didn't cover one of the bigger stories that made headlines a couple weeks ago about the blog post from FreeBSD Girl talking about being the developer formerly known as FreeBSD Girl and some of that. So Alan and I both kind of sat on the story for a little bit, partially because, A, we are aware of some of the details surrounding the incident, and the news was still ongoing, and we didn't feel it necessarily the right time to discuss it until some of the facts had time to shake out.
I was mostly hoping that the core team's report about it would be ready by now, but it's been 2 weeks now, and well, I understand that it will probably take that longer. We're getting quite a bit of feedback about how we have not talked about it.
People are like, you didn't mention it, therefore somehow we're doing something wrong by not mentioning it, right? So obviously we are going to talk about that, and we will do a little bit of that today. But hopefully, this gives us a little time to kind of cool down and read some of the information and have a little cooler discussion about it. But without going into all the gory details, there's just some key points that we wanted to make for our listeners, and me and Alan each have our own thoughts on this. So I guess we'll do that now. And of course, we pre-wrote them down, too, to make sure I don't step on any landmines and blow off my legs. But first up, I guess I will go first, since that's what we got in the notes here. But first of all, the FreeBSD that I know has been pretty much very open and inclusive pretty much to anyone who wants to contribute. They have that saying, shut up and code, and that's there for a reason. And we've seen developers of all types, different races, genders, creeds, etc. And the only thing I see that we all have in common is a love for BSD. So for me, that's just been my personal experience going on, 10 plus years now at this point, being involved with the FreeBSD project in what I do with PCBSD. So the particulars of this incident, unfortunately, we've seen in the press, or I've seen, it seems like it's always being linked back to FreeBSD, which I'm not sure is really a fair association, since the project and other members of the community aren't directly involved at all. Like, obviously, there's a ton of us, Alan and I included, who weren't involved on the original confrontation and all that. And what started out as a disagreement over something non-BSD related quickly turned into an ugly slugfest all across social media, and unfortunately briefly landed in a BSD chat room, which I didn't even see at the time. I don't know. Did you, Alan? Were you there live when it was happening?
No.
Yeah, see, neither was I. So, again, a lot of us just kind of woke up and were like, oh, what happened? But in any case, after reviewing a lot of the facts, and I've had to go back and read chat logs and different, snippets of things from social media, I think, for my part, I think it's fair to say both sides were way out of line in how this was dealt with, and I hope that both sides recognize that. But the thing that's been kind of personally bothering me about this over the last few weeks is I'm seeing emails and other things on social media where there's been kind of a, backlash against the core team and the FreeBSD Foundation. And somehow people are interpreting the delay or silence as an admission of wrongdoing. But I've talked to folks over there, and I want to tell you, I don't think anything could be further from the truth. These people are serious people. They're doing a very serious job. And much like in BSD, they'd rather take the time to do something right instead of just popping off on social media and potentially making things worse. Plus, I know Alan's going to make this point too. We have to remember, these are all volunteers who are spread out across many different time zones, different continents, the whole 9 yards. and they have to get together, meet, and discuss and do all their research. So there's going to be a little time lag. It's not like you're talking to one CEO or person who can make a judgment call and fire off a response within a few minutes. So obviously they're taking the time to do this right and making sure that they do all their homework and research before they just make a statement and end up regretting it later. With any kind of story like this, obviously they need to do that. And also, my 2 cents I wanted to put out there. Look, if you hear rumors of incidents of harassment, and this doesn't just apply to the FreeBSD project, this could be any project you're associated with. Remember that just without any details at all, those are just rumors. So if you want something to change in a project, if you think there's a problem, you need to come forward and share details so that action can be taken and things can be done to fix the problems and make it better for everyone in the community. Obviously, I believe in, innocent until proven guilty. So if somebody's done something, like, bring the facts forward and let the community take care of it, and let those in leadership in core or the foundation or whatever take care of it. And again, that goes, pretty much without saying for all projects out there, not just necessarily FreeBSD. But anyway, not the most fun story we've had to comment on, Alan. So that's maybe why we were waiting to see how everything shook out first before we talked about it, and avoided having to come back and make corrections later and apologize for things like, oh, I didn't know that and whatnot. But obviously we're still eagerly awaiting the core team response and anything that comes out of the foundation talking about some of the allegations in Randy's blog as well.
Yeah, so, I think that's the biggest thing, is that you have to remember that the FreeBSD Foundation doesn't have the ability to discipline a developer or anything like that. Specifically, the foundation is not given any power. When it was set up specifically, all it can do is provide support. So, if the core team wants to consult with some experts to help write the code of conduct or develop a response policy for this type of thing, they can have the foundation help them, but the foundation doesn't really get to decide how this should be handled. And so I definitely don't think it's fair to blame the foundation for a lot of this. But I don't know. So from my side of it, it was, I haven't been a part of the FreeBSD community proper for as long as Chris. I've been a user for at least that long, but I haven't really known many people or been part of the community until the last 3 or 4 years. But so far, the FreeBSD community has been the best group of people that I've ever worked with. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that it's immune to the same problems that every other group of people will eventually face. As much as we all wish it didn't, harassment and other ill behavior does happen, and we have to deal with it rather than hoping it doesn't happen again. The FreeBSD core team has previously sanctioned committers and revoked commit bits and things like that for incidents that happened entirely offline and entirely outside of the FreeBSD community. And it's because as a developer, you really are representing the project, and you have to act like it. Otherwise, the project doesn't want to be associated with you. So that's one of the important things. And there was something written in the project documentation that I saw just before I originally became a committer, although I can't find it for the life of me now. But it was talking about specifically, you could tell it was written earlier, probably like in the 90s or 2000s or whatever, but it was talking about, the prestige that comes from having an @freebsd.org account, and, how that much more weight your email on Usenet will carry if it comes from that address and so on. Well, maybe that's slightly less now. We would hope that, when you're replying on a mailing list for another project or something, and it's coming from an @freebsd.org address, that means they take you more seriously because you're part of FreeBSD, and those guys know what they're doing, and they're good people and so on. And so, we can only maintain that if we police the developers. Well, at the same time, it's not the core's job, or the community doesn't have the capacity to go police everything everybody does, but we can ask developers to, behave themselves, and if they can't, then they can't be developers anymore. In this specific situation, I'm not sure what core did exactly. We'll have to wait for the report for that, but I'm not entirely sure what they could have done differently either. According to the bylaws, an individual member of core has the power to temporarily suspend commit privileges until core as a whole has had a chance to review an issue, and they can only suspend for, I think, 1 week. Only a two-thirds majority of core has the authority to suspend commit privileges for longer than a week or to remove them permanently. Core's special powers only kick in when a person is when core is acting as a group, not on an individual basis. As individuals, the core members are all committers first and core teams second.
Well, that's a safety feature for everyone in the project, so you don't piss off one core member and he's like, that's it, account deleted in a fit of rage. You know?
Yes, but also just it means that every member of core has to follow the same rules as everybody else. But the big thing there is because core is representing the whole project, especially when it makes a decision, that means that they all have to have time to receive the information, digest it, discuss it, and then vote on it before something can happen. And obviously that's why this is taking so long. There's a lot of material. Lots of people have to review it, and they have to discuss it, and they have to decide what to do, work on that, come up, and then eventually vote on it. And this is further exacerbated by the fact that, you know, the core team is made up of 9 people, all who have other responsibilities and commitments outside of their volunteer time for core, and they're spread across 6 different countries, on almost every different continent, and 6 different time zones. And those time zones don't necessarily map to just being in a different country. You know, some countries have multiple time zones. And so if you've ever had tried to have a meeting with 3 or 4 people in different time zones, imagine trying to do that with 9 people that are all busy. You know, we've been trying to schedule just 2 people from the core team to come on and talk about teaching BSD for 3 months now, and haven't managed to find a time slot. And this isn't helping.
Being at core that's not a full-time job.
Yeah.
That's something you do. You know, it's a privilege to do it, but, you know.
Exactly.
People pay the bills too otherwise.
So, you know, an individual member of core could have revoked someone's commit when harassment was reported, but, you know, I don't think that necessarily would have made much of a difference in the end. And that's mostly because this is a social problem, not a technical problem. And so taking away technical access didn't affect it. But because of that, that's at the end of Randy's post, she had a list of 10 things the project should do or consider doing or whatever. And I think the only one that I don't think is possible is number 6, which asks for, you know, when somebody reports a problem, that they get response at least daily or more often. And because core cannot send a response until, you know, everybody on core has had time to look at the incoming thing and decide and, you know, basically vote on what the response will be, it's just physically impossible for that to happen multiple times a day like that. And so that's, you know, a limitation that will have to be worked around in the framework. You know, at the same time, if you report a problem, you don't want to not hear anything for 2 weeks, right?
Sure.
So maybe it's just a matter of, you know, the core secretary makes sure to acknowledge and provide updates in a timely fashion. But, you know, even the monthly core reports don't always come out on time because, again, volunteers. So I don't know. In the end, we eagerly await core's report on the matter, and more importantly, core and the foundation working together to come up with a better framework and response policy, because, you know, as technical people, we all love having a checklist of things we should do when, you know, we all have these for when a server breaks or when, you know, the steps you take to debug a program when it doesn't work. So I think we need to build something along those lines so that not just this core team, but more importantly, the next core team, which will be elected this summer, who's going to be people that didn't necessarily live through this ordeal, will know how to respond if this ever happens again. But I think the important thing is to ensure that incident reports are properly handled, and specifically that those reporting the issues feel safe in doing so and aren't worried about retaliation or something like that, so that if there is a problem, you know, it gets reported to the right people instead of just, you know, rumors or you know, incidents where we've heard of other people having problems but not telling anybody about it. And, you know, that's how this can be left to happen again, right? Whereas if it gets reported, we can make sure it doesn't.
That doesn't solve a problem.
Yeah.
It's like ignoring, you have a hard disk, you know, a server with 10 disks and one of them fails and you're just like, I'll let it go.
Yeah. And then, the second one decides it's okay to do that. And now your RAID array is corrupt.
Yeah, not good.
Yeah.
Of course, we had to bring that back to a technical analogy.
So while we hope that there's never another incident of harassment in the FreeBSD community, the realities of the world we live in means that we need to be ready to deal with it in case there is.
Yep. Okay. Well, that's really all we can say, I guess, at this time until we hear more from Core and Foundation and more information comes out. But of course, we'll try and bring that to you in the future. So thank you for being patient with us while we, sifted through all the material and figured out what we needed to say and all that. But obviously, we'll look forward to seeing the Core report. Hopefully, that hits soon. I don't have a timetable on that yet.
I don't know. You just know that they're. A couple of people from Core are saying, this is not how I plan to spend my first 2 weeks of the new year.
Yeah. People are busy working on this, so we'll let them be and see what comes of it here in the next couple weeks. Okay, well, I guess it's time to actually get into some cool BSD news now relating to some neat stuff we have here. But Dan Lingiel, who's been a longtime friend of this program, you guys probably know him. Yes. Maybe you've ever read FreeBSD Diary or used Freshports or FreshSource. Maybe you've gone to BSDCan. Well, in that case, you know Dan. Yep. So you may be interested in seeing some of the pictures and whatnot about where these sites are actually served from. And it looks like Dan has posted that over to Reddit with information about his home lab with, of course, all the obligatory pictures so you can kind of oogle and ah over it. But as, of course, most good home racks do, this one starts at Home Depot and ends up with a variety of systems and various hardware living on it, which I don't know if you can show the pictures there.
I'm showing them.
You have them on the screen. All in all, it looks pretty nice. A lot of nice wiring. I was surprised it's a lot of like workstation.
Yeah, I see that.
I didn't see as many ones.
The one big thing laying down here is a tape library. I think there's actually more than one tape library in there.
Yep.
And a couple other ones like that. I can see he's got his little snort pig. But yeah, I was a little surprised to see the giant towers. But I guess for him, the problem with this, as you can see from the laptop over here, he generally sits in here to work. And so a bunch of one-use or two-use machines that scream at you when they run would probably be not so much fun for him.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I think until recently, these machines were just scattered around the house or whatever, and so one-use didn't necessarily make sense.
Nice. So I was wondering, though, with that ASUS access point he has sitting up there, the RTN66U that he mentions, is that running FreeBSD, Dan, or is it just an access point? Just curious. But also, this is actually a good chance to remind you, since Dan's the guy who does BSDCan, the talk proposal. If you're planning on going or you want to submit a talk, don't forget to get that in by January 19th. So what is that? Right now, that's early next week. So next Tuesday. Yep. So try and get your talk proposal submitted before then so you can be considered. Okay.
Yeah, I'm still trying to get more people to submit talks.
That's right.
I want there to be so many talks submitted that mine doesn't get accepted.
Yeah. I'm not even sending one this year. I'm just going to go. It's going to be fun.
Yeah. That was I like doing that. Getting to go to the conference and not spend any time worrying about giving your talk is nice.
It's been years since I've not done a talk. Since like one of the first times I went to BSDCan, it's been a talk every year. So this will be nice. Get to go and actually sit in and listen to everyone. And of course, more time then to hang out with you, Alan, and do interviews. So if you're planning on coming, just heads up, we're going to find you.
Yes.
And we will interview you. It cannot be avoided. You might as well just come find us and get it done thoroughly.
Yes. Especially we'll have to, I'll have to put in addition to the talk, I'll have to get Dan to reserve us a room again like he did last year, because that worked really nicely.
Yeah. Yeah, that works well.
I don't know which building we'll be in this year, but it's the same one again. If we can get that nice little quiet room, that was amazing.
Well, hey, hopefully we won't be, I don't know, many, many years ago. Did you come when it was in the site building way south? Yes, that was quite a hike.
I remember when you were the dev summit was in a building further away, but the main conference was still in the regular building.
Well, we'll find out here soon, but looking forward to it. I'm excited for BSDCan this year.
Yes, me too.
Man, we got Tokyo coming up in a couple months. Good Lord, man. I need to start booking things.
Well, yeah, plus I'm going to the the storage conference, or Dev Summit, Storage Dev Summit, which is part of nginx File Systems and Storage Technology Conference. So, yeah.
It's going to be a busy year.
I'm going to have something like every month, basically. Actually, I think the fact that BSDCan's in June instead of May will mean that I actually don't end up going somewhere in May.
Hey, good deal. Okay, well, next up, we got some OpenBSD news to share with you guys. So first of all, we have some pledge information. So Theo gives us a little bit of a status update on what pledge is looking like for a pre-OpenBSD 5.9. So one of the quotes he says here is, for the next upcoming release, we will be disabling the paths argument. And the reasoning is we've been very busy making as much of the tree set the promises right in applications and building a few new promises as well. We simply don't have time to review the kernel code and make sure it's bug-free. We're going to use the next 6 months development cycle to decide on paths and then re-audit the tree to use the interface where it is suitable. And then he gives us kind of a status update. He said the base tree, which of course is bin, sbin, user sbin, libexec, and user games, contains 652 ELF binaries. Out of those, 451 use pledge, 201 do not. Approximately 47 do not need or cannot use pledge for various reasons, leaving 154 we could potentially pledge in the future. He said most of those are not very important. There's a few hotspots, but most of what people use has been handled well by the team. So that's really cool. That's a huge chunk of them they've already been able to convert over.
Being able to decide to use that extra argument or not seems like, that's a lot of mechanical work to go and change the arguments to the pledge call everywhere. That means a lot more reviewing on it all and making sure it works. But that's some interesting stuff. And they have a follow-up here where they got Chromium, the web browser, now uses pledge on OpenBSD. They say the renderer, GPU, plugins, and utility processes are now using the pledge. Unfortunately, the GPU process only requires an RPath pledge because of Mesa trying to parse two config files. The first one is etc.dri.rc and home/.dri.rc. So currently the GPU process will use the RPath pledge in the next week or so, so that people can test it. But this situation has to be resolved because it's not acceptable that a mostly unused configuration file is being parsed from a library, and that stops us from using fewer pledges and thus disallowing the GPU to have read access to the file system. Specifically, so a malicious Chrome plugin or something can't try to read your SSH keys.
Which,
because there was some browser or some application, it was like a year and a half ago, that was stealing SSH keys. I'm trying to remember what it was, but I don't remember any of it.
But we had an update actually on this already where it looks like the RPath pledge has already been removed.
Right.
So since this was originally posted.
I think we might have had these two stories out of order because the first one talks about RPath being not allowed in the next version anyway. But I think somewhere else I was just noting it was interesting that they support certain ones in Firefox and different ones in Chrome, and they're both getting work but aren't quite all the way there yet. But anyway.
Well, what do you say here? Let me read the quote here about the interesting situation. Maybe I saw this somewhere else. But they said it's interesting now about Firefox has support for one.
I think it's WXRX.
Chromium another.
And Chrome has pledge instead, but they don't have the opposite yet.
Yep, that is funny. But that's cool to see that they're already converting that stuff over. Maybe we should have pledge show up elsewhere. That seems really neat.
Yeah, we'll have to see.
Okay, so first up this week, we're going to have our first sponsor, which of course is going to be IX Systems, and we do want to mention it's ixsystems.com/BSDNow. But we have another link in the show notes here sending you to the FreeNAS logo design contest. We want to remind you that is still ongoing.
Yes, so that
may be something
until January 20th.
Okay.
And they have the list of guidelines and so on, what they want the logo to be and what they want it to look like. Yes, the deadline is 8 a.m. Pacific on January 20th, so really the night of January 19th for most people. And the prize is $750 or a FreeNAS Mini, which is worth more than $750, so you would probably pick that unless you already have one. They provide all the details you need as a professional designer, the primary and secondary colors they want with, in every version, including Pantone, CMYK, RGB, and Hex. The copyright assignment they want for it and everything. But it'll be interesting to see what the new FreeNAS logo ends up looking like.
Yeah, that will be neat. So definitely, if you have some artistic skills or know somebody who does, get them to design a logo and submit that. You still got about a week to turn that in.
Yes.
So try and get that in as soon as possible. And of course, we'll have to bring that to you guys once the new logo gets picked, and we'll show you and everything and announce who the winner was. But again, guys, we're here to talk a little bit about IX systems. So, of course, go talk to those guys. If you need your new server for 2016, you're throwing out some old gear and upgrading, or doing a new project, give them a call. Tell them exactly what it is you're trying to do, what the what kind of the situation is, what the minimum level of performance is you need, because that's very important, and they'll make sure they design a system around that. And the cool thing is you can actually talk software with them too. It's not just hardware. Like they'll be like, oh, you're trying to do this with ZFS, or you're trying to do this with serving this over NFS. Like, okay, we can make something do that.
As we saw with talking to Josh last week, they have some real experts on staff.
Yes, they do.
And actually, I just sent away an email today asking them for a quote on some new stuff. We need video transcoding servers for doing multi-bit rate live streams. And there's 2 different approaches we can take for that. The one is using smaller, like single processor servers that have more gigahertz, but have there's a couple of certain versions of the Xeon processors that have the graphics card built in, like the ones you would get in like a laptop or a desktop. And you can use Intel QuickSync to have that do the video transcoding, and it can get a lot more, amount of video done in the same amount of CPU time because it's doing the graphics card to do a lot of the work. Or the other option we have is building a bigger box with, like dual E5s and getting really expensive processors, or a lower end E5, like the regular size one, but putting special like NVIDIA Kepler video cards in it. The workstation type, like Quadros, and offloading to that. But of course, those are like full-size cards, so it's like, well, we need a chassis that will be able to fit those by either turning them sideways in 2Us or like a 3 or 4U chassis that can take them standing up, and so on. So, I have some really unusual requests for my next machine, and it'd be interesting to see what they can come up with, because I know they will probably have 2 or 3 different approaches to solve my problem, and if I was dealing with someone else, if I called Dell and said, I need this, and I'm like, sorry, we don't do that. Yeah. Or, well, we have this.
Or here, we'll just sell you the stock one off the shelf, and hopefully it'll do
it's like, we'll sell you one in a tower case and have fun rack mounting it.
Yeah. Well, definitely you'll have to show us some pictures of that, Alan, when you decide which route you're going to go. I'd like to see what that looks like.
Well, if we go with the E3s, it'll just be a little 1U.
Right.
And if we do the other things, it could be a massive server that's mostly just full of air for the video cards.
Well, it'll be cool to see either way. And definitely, I mean, if they're going to pay attention to that much detail, you guys should definitely consider them for the next time you got to purchase some new hardware. So again, it could be everything from video transcoding to storage to smaller little FreeNAS mini boxes. Get in touch with the guys over at IX Systems and let them take care of you right.
So this week we're joined by Igor from nginx. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us.
Well, thanks for being here.
Basically Igor's nginx. Can you tell us a little bit how that got started?
Sorry, what?
How did you get started with nginx?
I started somewhere in 2002. Maybe spring or maybe autumn, I don't remember exactly. There was some drafts somewhere in this time.
And so it's grown quite a bit since then. It's become very popular. What would you say is your favorite feature of nginx?
Of the current version of nginx?
Yes.
The main features of what?
Which feature are you most proud of?
I'm most proud of. My favorite feature is online upgrade. Because it's almost unique feature. There is several. Probably before nginx, only some IRC daemon can do this, and it was not my idea. It was suggested by my colleague, and I implemented it. And after this, many web servers, not many, but some of web servers did implement it.
Yeah,
probably Cherokee and maybe some more. You mentioned earlier that it's most popular in Russia. Yes, nginx is very popular in Russia. It used at more than 60% of Russian sites. Wow, yeah, in the world, we less popular. If we look at Web3 tech statistics, nginx used at, I do not remember exactly, but 36% of 1,000 top sites.
Yes, the nginx's market penetration is much higher in busy sites than slow sites.
And we probably half a year ago we overcome IEs in 10 or 100,000 top sites. I don't remember exact the category, somewhere in there.
What would you say was the biggest challenge you've overcome building nginx?
Big challenge when I started to. It was just interesting. It was my hobby. I like to make handy configurable server that can handle many connections, thousands of connections, and I like that. I wanted that it should be a very reliable server, and server that can do can serve static files and proxy requests to remote sites.
Yeah, one of the big things with nginx is solves what's called the C10K problem, dealing with 10,000 clients at once, which used to be huge, and now that's actually not that uncommon. And the great thing with nginx is you can deal with 10,000 concurrent connections in less than 10 megabytes of memory, which each Apache child takes like 4 times that. That's very impressive.
Apache, for static files, Apache used somewhere about several hundreds kilobytes. nginx used much lesser, and this is reasonable. It's scalable.
Yeah, and nginx also takes advantage of a lot of unique features in FreeBSD, like send file and accept filters.
nginx tries to use unique features of all operating systems, but my primary target was FreeBSD. This operating system I used in the job at home for a long time. Currently, I switched to macOS, but macOS X 10. But for 2000 until 2010, probably FreeBSD was my desktop operating system, book operating system, and server operating system. Currently, I use it only on server. And yes, nginx use many unique features of FreeBSD, or for example, send file specific FreeBSD specific flags of send file. It uses KQ, also KQ transported on all BSD systems, which will started on FreeBSD. Currently, nginx version 2 is use more features of Linux, because Linux has, for example, splice system call that allow to proxy efficiently unmodified content between client and backend.
OpenBSD has that as well. Socket splicing. It's different.
It is different. It's different thing. I know that there will be talk about this.
Yeah, it's after lunch.
Yeah. I'm not sure that I will see this talk because it conflicts with another interesting talk for me.
That talk with the socket splicing was also given at BSDCamp, so you can find it on YouTube if you get a chance to see it.
What? Sorry.
That talk was given at a different event earlier, so you can find a video of it on YouTube. Called Relay.
Everything is recorded.
Yes.
Oh, it's fine because there are several talks yesterday and today which I wanted to see, but
yes.
Okay.
I believe nginx is what Netflix is using to serve their videos, so you can easily claim more than 30% of all US traffic as well. It's coming from an nginx connection.
Yes, we started to work with Netflix 2 years ago. It was actually our first commercial customer. We're happy to work with Netflix and hope they happy to work with us too. Yeah, we did a lot of work with tuning FreeBSD kernel because the tuning inside nginx. When we 10 years ago, when you need to run your server, if you need to tune your server, you had to tune Apache because bottleneck was CGI, next Apache, and only after this the bottleneck became kernel. But nginx used more efficient interfaces to work with kernel. So bottleneck currently is not web server, but the kernel networking subsystem, disk subsystems, VM, etc. And the main task, if you like to configure a web server for heavy load, you have to tune kernel at the moment.
Yes, nginx is so lightweight that it gets out of the way.
Yeah, if you look at the top, you will see that user land. If we speak about static content serving, you will see that nginx takes about several percent of user land.
Yeah, even under our heavy load, where we're throwing thousands of requests per second, the nginx is barely even showing up in the CPU load.
The most typical time is system time. Of course, when nginx does call send file or send something in socket, the system time is anyway accounted for nginx. But anyway, this time in the system. So if you tune your system, your kernel, this system time may decrease.
So it was last year that nginx started a business around nginx?
We started 2 years ago in 2011, and we get venture funding, $3 million from several investors, E-Ventures, Luna Capital, and Michael Dale Fund.
And so, how is that interacting between having open source and the proprietary project?
We continue to develop our open source version. For these 2 years, we added support for web proxy protocol and SPDI protocol. It's especially the later one is a really complex project. And we offer professional services, and recently we released our first commercial product, nginx Plus. nginx Plus offer more monitoring, adds several adaptive streaming protocols, adaptive video streaming protocols, more advanced load balancing features, and some others.
No, that's really cool to hear, though. Interesting.
So yes, thank you for joining us, and
Appreciate you being here.
that's all we have for the interview. So see you next time.
See you guys next week.
We're back. Hope you guys enjoyed the interview. We still have plenty of show left, so don't go running anywhere yet. But before we get into the news roundup, we do need to mention our sponsor this week, which is going to be DigitalOcean. Of course, the website for that, digitalocean.com, where you can go and get signed up and create your droplets running FreeBSD or open or even net. There's ways to do that now too. So definitely need to give them a shot. And we have the coupon code FreeBSDNow we want to mention. We had some people talk to us last week saying that code wasn't working, but we think it was an issue because the code, another code had already been redeemed on the account. So still try and give that a shot. If we hear that code's gone away, though, we will let you know.
We'll get it fixed and get a different one or something.
That's right. That's right.
But yeah, if you use the coupon code FreeBSDNow, they'll add $10 to your account, which on their cheapest machine will give you 2 months of VM.
That's right. VM with like a lot of transfer, too.
It's like a terabyte.
A terabyte, and it's backed by SSDs and the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
So
the other thing that really really sets DigitalOcean apart is the they have community section where they have guides and tutorials, but they're very well written and edited, right? So not just following some random guy's blog, but some articles that have actually been tested and edited for language and so on.
Well, I've run across them in the past when I've been just Googling a random problem, like setting up something on my FreeBSD router, and all of a sudden, a DigitalOcean guide on how to do this with PF or something.
Exactly.
Like, oh, okay, what do you know?
They also have an API, which allows you to do everything you can do via their very, very nice control panel, with a tool. And they have here, you can use Apache's libcloud or serverpilot or whatever, and you can hook this all up so that you can spin VMs up and tear them down automatically. And if you do that, you can also use their hourly pricing. So instead of paying $5 a month for the server, you can pay 0.7 cents per hour and only run it for as long as you need. So you could spin up one of their much bigger instances to run Poudriere for an hour and then turn it off, and save a lot of money.
That's right. So again, guys, check that out. DigitalOcean.com is where you want to go, and if you talk to anyone over there, tell them you heard about it here on BSD Now. Okay, so first up in the news this week, a couple years back, I think we covered the story about FreeBSD on the Edge router Lite.
I don't think it was years ago.
That sounds.
It was
a while.
Well, a couple months ago, anyway. Yeah.
Okay, it was a while back, but this week we get to revisit this a little bit here because it looks like Colin Percival has posted a script, and he's got a really detailed walkthrough of how you can use his script to generate your own custom image, which does not require hooking up serial cables to get the system bootstrapped and set up, which is pretty stinking cool.
Yeah.
So he says so currently it's only on current though, but go ahead. Sorry, Alan.
Well, it's just, when we did this at BSDCan with the TP-Link router, the problem was you had to solder on a serial port. Eventually we got to the point where you could do something similar to this, but it wasn't as clean and it only worked one time. Whereas this one looks much better.
Yeah, very reproducible. But he said the script's currently working on the current version of FreeBSD on head, maybe for 10.3. I guess there's some stuff that needs to be backported to make that go. But the script is pretty complete. He says it does the build world. It'll do the creation of a USB media for you. And on your first boot, it's even going to do some basic firewall configuration, do things like GrowFS to expand and use the full size your USB stick, which is pretty stinking cool. I guess it uses that first boot keyword in the rc.d script system, which is pretty cool.
Yes, I think Colin actually designed that for the Amazon EC2 images to be able to have them, the first time they set up, they run FreeBSD update. So if you're using an older AMI, it will still have all the security patches before it goes online.
I'm going to have to switch on 11. We do some stuff at first boot too, and I'll have to maybe switch to using that keyword. That seems like a good idea. But anyway, if you're looking at switching to a FreeBSD-based router, maybe you have one of these already, do yourself a favor. Look at this article. You'll save yourself a lot of time and hassle. It'll just make this super, super easy. And it'd be nice to have one of those. I may have to pick one up, Alan. That looks pretty cool.
Does look very nice.
Yeah. Okay. So next up, I guess John Marino reaches out to the community for some testing of Synth, a new custom package repo builder. So tell us what this is,
Yeah.
Alan.
So basically, it's a hybrid between something like Poudriere, which is designed for building the binary packages for the whole ports tree as the FreeBSD project, and things like Portmaster or Port Upgrade, which are meant to rebuild the ports you're using on your one system. So the downside to using Poudriere for your own system is that you end up, you need a jail with the install of your operating system, and you need a separate checkout of the ports tree and all this stuff managed by Poudriere. Whereas this Synth tool will use the operating system you're standing on and the the ports tree in your regular user ports, but will still build things and use basically a faster version of Portmaster that's modern and written for our package tools, whereas the port upgrade was kind of just
that's old
minimum amount to get it working with package instead of the old package_add stuff. So it's nice to see some modern software to actually deal with keeping your one machine up to date, and it's on GitHub, so it's easy to make changes to. But he also talks about one of the goals for the future is a feature where for dependencies of a package you're building, right? If you're going to, I'm going to compile nginx custom because I want to take advantage of this new module that it has or some non-standard feature of it, but being able to download the binary packages of the dependencies. So, I want to build nginx, but I don't want to build my own version of OpenSSL and my own version of Perl and PCRE and all the dependencies. So being able to pull down the binaries for dependencies, but still custom compile the things you want to custom compile, will make this a very compelling tool.
Nice. It looks pretty promising. So I don't know if we mentioned it was on Dragonfly. Where
yes, he he says if your initial feedback is good, he'll push this into the FreeBSD ports tree as well, and the FreeBSD users can do it there. He still needs to write a man page and add support for Linux packages.
Okay. That sounds pretty neat.
But it sounds like a cool project to get involved with, especially if you're, a newer person who maybe is not comfortable with writing, high-level stuff, but you want to start working on something that's, it's a tool that everybody needs, right?
That's right.
You got to keep your packages up to date.
Okay, well, next up here we have an interesting comment, or I guess commit, it looks like, over on Android Review, talking about OpenBSD's malloc. So I guess we can score one for their rigorous security and attention to detail on OpenBSD land, because they were able to use this to find a mistake in the unencrypt routines on Android, in particular using a variable memory, which had already gone out of scope. So it looked like they were able to catch this potentially bad bug using OpenBSD's malloc junk filling feature. And using that, they can identify and correct the issue. So I think,
because by default, if when you assign some memory, and then when you free it, it just gets marked as free, and the old data is still there. So when you try to use it, it might work, or it could potentially have random things in it instead, or an attacker could have made it have exactly what they want to have in it. So what OpenBSD's malloc does is fill it with a junk pattern. And so if you're working on your program and suddenly you see this gibberish come out of it, you know that it's because it's actually reading memory that it shouldn't be. And then you can track down the problem and fix it. And that's what they were able to do here.
Yeah, that is cool. They were able to score a fix to Android using that.
Yes, I think there's a way to make the FreeBSD malloc do that. It just doesn't do it by default like OpenBSD does. I think if you have, I think it's malloc.conf, or maybe you have to be in your kernel config, but you can add an option to make it do the same thing.
Is it just a performance thing?
Yeah, mainly it's having to overwrite every bit of memory when you free it has a small performance penalty.
Yeah, there'll be a hit.
Yeah, but especially during development phase at least, it makes sense to have that on to find these kind of problems and fix them before you ship it in your code.
That's right. Okay, well, next up we have some neat slides here that were presented by Gleb Smirnoff at last year's FreeBSD Storage Summit, talking about some changes to send file made by Netflix. So we went through some of these slides here, but first off, it starts off with a little bit of history showing the misery of life without send file back in FreeBSD 1.0, showing how things worked in the FTPD daemon, which, that looks definitely a little ugly.
Well, yeah, the big thing that... The big change was before send file, if you were, say, the web server and a user wanted this, 10 megabyte file, you would, as the web server, read the file from the disk and then write some of it to the socket and then wait until they had received it and then read some more and write some more and do this. And basically that thread of the web server was busy that whole time. So then the innovation was send file, which allowed you to say, hey, kernel, please take this file or this chunk of a file and put it into this socket for me and let me know when you're done, which simplified things quite a bit and basically reduced the amount of syscalls you had to do.
Sure. That was like 1997, HPUX, I guess 11.00 is what grew that first, and then FreeBSD 3.0 and Linux 2.2 grabbed it in 98.
Yep. And then eventually FreeBSD gained the SF_no disk IO flag, which basically told it to not block or wait for the disk and so on. But this work is asynchronous send file. So the big difference is instead of waiting for send file to actually finish, you just say, hey, go do this work. And then the web server like nginx can just continue. And then it will get a notification from the kernel when it's done, and it can do, whatever other tasks are left at the end. Like, on the web server, you're going to log how many bytes were actually sent and things like that.
That's pretty cool. So what they say it took the maximum load from on an older Netflix box.
Yeah, so they had an older, now Netflix can get like 90 gigabits out of a machine, but this work was, almost a year old. Netflix has been using it for a while, but it just recently went into FreeBSD. But they had a box that was able to do about 25 gigabits a second. And just by changing, adding this patch, they were able to get it up to 35 gigabits a second.
Oh, that's significant performance gain.
And they have some nice dtrace frame graphs and a bunch of other stuff on here. It's very nice looking.
So what is this also? Now they're doing an encrypted version of that?
Yes. So they've also, they presented to AsiaBSDCon last year about was a version of send file that can do TLS encryption on the data as it goes through. And offloading that into the kernel as well, so it can take advantage of, crypto offload card and things like that. And then the slides also end with the to-do list, the things that aren't done for send file yet. And one of those is integration with ZFS. Because send file uses the kernel's buffer cache, it means that if you send file with ZFS, you can end up with the same file in memory twice. Once in the ZFS arc and once where send file is actually storing it. So an interesting project for somebody would be working that in such a way that
pull it directly out of the arc.
Yeah, that you could reuse the arc in that way. One of the suggestions I heard for that was actually taking the arc and making it a separate module from ZFS so that you could even possibly use the arc with UFS.
Interesting, yeah. Use it for arbitrary other things.
Yeah, and then it would, if it was separate from ZFS, it would be easier maybe to integrate it into the rest of the system such that you could hook it up with send file. The complication with that is obviously the arc keeps changing in ZFS, right? We're getting like support for LZ4 compression in the arc, which at the same time though means, well, that'd be a really nice feature maybe to have for UFS, but then it mostly depends on the files are on the disk are to be compressed, and UFS doesn't have that, so maybe it doesn't make sense. But it'll be interesting to see what else happens here. And I'm mostly just glad that this work finally made it into FreeBSD.
Yeah, that's great that it landed. So I guess that'll be backported to 10.3 or something.
I don't think so, because it probably changes the interface for using send files. So
okay, makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, folks, we got a lot of Beastie Bits this week. We got some feedback and questions, so we're going to get to that here right after we mention Tarsnap, of course, which, come on, tarsnap.com/BSDNow, and I think Alan has a new website to show us. There's even pictures, or a picture.
Yes. So yes, the Tarsnap website has grown a picture and some other improvements to the web. So on top of the logo's been there a while, but it's got a better breakdown of why you want to use Tarsnap. It's all about the encryption, having access to the source code, and the great deduplication algorithm that Colin wrote for it. And it still mentions that it runs on every OS like BSD, Linux, Mac OS, Cygwin, etc. I guess Minix doesn't rate a specific mention anymore. But the biggest thing is that there are no other fees. You only pay the 250 picodollars per byte month for your data, and your 250 picodollars per byte for your encoded data. In particular, that means after all the deduplication and so on. So it means you can actually back up a lot of data and not pay for it all. So they actually have a diagram here that shows how that works. So you have your hard drive with your files on it. Say all your files are like 7,588 megabytes. But then Tarsnap breaks that down into unique blocks with this deduplication algorithm and figures out that today you only actually change 2.2 megabytes of stuff. And so then it compresses that down to only, say, 1.8 megabytes. Then it encrypts it with your personal key so that no one else can decrypt it. And then it sends that to Tarsnap. And so you only actually pay to upload 0.81 megabytes, even though you had 2.2 megabytes of new data on your 7.5 gigabytes of total data. So you only pay, less than 1 cent to upload that. And then your data sits on Tarsnap, separated from everybody else's. And in total, even though you have 15 gigabytes of data up there, it's only costing you $3.95 a month. And importantly,
too stinking cheap.
Yeah. So they show, they have Alice and Bob and Carol and Dave with their data up in Tarsnap, but the bad person, Mallory, doesn't have Alice's key, so cannot modify or decrypt Alice's files. And that's the important thing, is that, even if they're, threatening Colin or trying to arrest him or rubber hose cryptography, there's literally nothing he can do. Only you have the key.
No amount of broken fingers is going to fix this.
Yes. So please don't break Colin's fingers, because, just read the website and you'll see.
He's telling the truth when he says he can't do it.
Yes, it is actually impossible.
That is awesome. Well, again, guys, get signed up today. It's 2016. Get your backups rolling. It's only going to take you a few minutes. If you already know tar, come on. You're 90% of the way there.
It is that
Super easy. Okay, so let's start with some beastie bits, Alan. So we got this first one here, a Unix timeline of how Unix versions have evolved since pretty much forever, I guess.
It starts in way back. 1969.
It was way back. I don't know if you could show the full graph there.
It's not possible to show the full one, but I'm zooming in tiny fractions of it at a time. And you can see there's Solaris 10 in December of 2006 and True 64 Unix. There's Mac OS 10, 10.6.6. It's got
looks like
everything.
He has the PDFs. You can even print these out if you want to make your own wall chart. You can do that.
And after building this chart that is humongous and has huge amounts of details, it's like this is just a simplified diagram of Unix's history. There are numerous derivative systems not listed on this chart, probably about 10 times more than are actually there. And even in the recent past, many electronics companies each had their own separate Unix release. And we didn't even cover all those. This diagram is only the tip of an iceberg with a penguin on it.
That is really cool. So definitely check that out. Check that out. Okay, so next up, we have
there's even an index, so you can use it to find where on the chart the Unix you like is actually posted.
See, that's I know. I had to look back at PCBSD. I forgot we started on FreeBSD 6.0. It's been a long time.
Yeah.
Goodness,
that's a good time to start, though.
Yeah, everything was right after 5.
Yeah, 5 was not fun.
Yep. Okay, so next up we have NetMap support now in Beehive on FreeBSD Current. So we have a link to the commit there for that.
Yes, this basically means that Beehive networking can be a lot faster now.
Yeah, that's going to be good. Okay, so what's next about McCabe complexity and Dragonfly BSD? So we got a link here.
Yeah,
I've never heard of it, but it's a description of how complicated software can be. Interesting.
Yeah, so it's some way, an algorithm that figures out how complicated a piece of software is. And so Pierre Abbott ran the measure against a bunch of snippets of code and found that Hammer FS is rather complicated.
That's right. Speaking of complicated, this next one I had to do a double take when I was reading through it, but somebody basically took the basic interpreter and implemented painfully in Bourne Shell. Oh, yes. Wow. We have the link to the Git.
More interesting is the message at the top, which seems to indicate this was actually written in 1987.
That's right.
And I've never heard of it before now.
I know. That is pretty crazy, but it's I guess a basic enough version to make it work. Pretty amazing.
Everything you need to build all your favorite basic programs and run them in Bash. Or actually, Bourne Shell. So that's just regular SH. Yeah. So then work on all your BSDs and stuff too. Yeah. So next time someone says they have to use Bash and they can't use regular Bourne Shell because it's not good enough, well, hey, somebody wrote a basic interpreter in it. If they can do that, I'm sure you can manage to make your shell script slightly more portable.
That's right. Okay, so what's this next one here? Nginx OS on FreeBSD, I guess Nginx packages?
Yes, so this is...
we got a link here.
Nginx OS has their packages working on FreeBSD now, and they're actually working on expanding that even some more, apparently.
Oh, nice.
But it's using Clang and building all their stuff. So a nginx version of FreeBSD might be a thing at some point.
Oh, that's pretty slick.
I don't know much about nginx, but I understand it's a different way of addressing packaging and updating and so on, and more declarative.
Oh, it's neat. There's all these new systems or different systems. You have alternatives now. We went from having just the old PKJ add to now PKG, and gosh, what do we have? nginx, Dragonfly packages, or NetBSD package source.
Yep.
Dang, pretty cool. Okay, so next up we have a link up on the OpenBSD side about turning an OpenBSD system into a router, and some nice examples here. So you may want to check that out if you're going to be building your new box.
Yes, so this is, I think, an expanded version of the tutorial that our old producer TJ wrote for us, expanded and actually made it into the OpenBSD FAQ.
Nice.
And it's even more detailed than our version of it, because it basically has to cover everything you might want to do. Instead of just the basics. But it's very well laid out and all the latest and greatest stuff. Nice.
Okay, well, last but not least, we have, it looks like NVIDIA has released a new beta driver for FreeBSD 361.16, which has quite a few changes in it. Specifically, it looks like they changed to a vendor-neutral driver, so the infrastructure is now included for that, and is supported by this new NVIDIA GLX and OpenGL drivers. They said it's not supposed to cause any visible changes in behavior for end users, but the internal driver components have been renamed and moved all around so as to not cause conflicts. But I guess it'll affect some of the scripts that maybe look at those drivers to see what's available based on file name and stuff. So it'll be interesting. I guess we'll see some new ports of this hopefully landing soon in the FreeBSD tree. And a possible bug, it looks like, where a mutex was unlocked more than once, which could cause a seg fault in glibc. So definitely a good fix. Hopefully that'll be landing in the ports tree soon.
It'd be nice to see that, I was getting a little concerned. I guess it was this that was holding it up, but it was the first time I'd noticed the FreeBSD NVIDIA driver not being as recent as the Windows one. Usually they're released together. But I guess this big architectural change has slowed that down a little bit. But hopefully they get back to being in sync, because that definitely made me more confident in the support of NVIDIA on FreeBSD, was just knowing that it's coming from the Windows driver and comes out at the same time, and so isn't a second-class citizen.
Isn't getting crufty. Yeah. Okay. Now it's time to get to some feedback here. So first up this week, we have Bryson who writes in. He has a question about a whole bunch of different things, but he says, first of all, TechSnap seems to get all the ZFS love, but I've got a question for you gentlemen. He said, assume I'm deploying servers on a SmartOS host.
So
in other words,
Giants Public
Cloud, yeah, where my FreeBSD guest will be a KVM virtual machine. SmartOS puts all KVM VMs inside of a zone, and Illumos zones in SmartOS use a ZFS ZFall for the VM disk. SmartOS makes heavy use of ZFS, and I'm planning on using ZFS in my VMs as well. How will this stacking affect ZFS inside my guest? Is this something I should be worried about? Are there other gotchas I should be aware of? Also, can you enumerate the sequence of events that take place when writing or modifying files in a copy on write on top of a copy on write setup with ZFS? Thanks for the info and all the time you put into the show.
So we asked, I think it was Justin Gibbs, when we talked to him about this type of question, and specifically, ZFS inside a VM where the underlying is also ZFS. You can avoid this complexity by just using UFS, or by trying to do something like NFS to pass through to use the raw ZFS from underneath in the VM, although not in the case of where it's joins public cloud and you don't have access to the host system.
Sure.
In this case, I'm not sure what the best thing to do is, but you could... Basically, I think it'll just be slightly slower because when ZFS asks for the ZFS in your VM asks for the guarantee that the data is written, it has to go down and go to the ZFS underneath. If it was your own machine, you could configure one or the other to, not be as picky. And it also depends what you're doing in the VM and how much you care. But you can, there are sacrifices you can make to get more performance. That may mean that, that last transaction group didn't actually make it all the way to the disk before your VM went down.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'd be interested in seeing like a tuning guide.
That one's complicated. Well,
it is.
The problem with writing a tuning guide for this is kind of like Josh was saying in the other episode. The best recommendation is really not to do this unless you know what you're doing.
All right. That is true.
But, it's hard to give up those features of ZFS.
Mm-hmm. Definitely is. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, next up we have Chris, who writes in with an interesting one. He says, "Hi, Alan and Chris. Well, you've done it. BSD Now has gotten me to start beginning switching my Linux home server setup to FreeBSD, but I'm encountering a roadblock I've been unable to solve. Samba mount points with timestamps of December 31st, 1969. This causes odd behavior with some of my applications." Well, for sure. He said both the NAS and BSD machine are using EST for the time zone. They have their clocks synced. I've tested mounting a share on FreeNAS and on Synology, no difference. Samba mounting from Linux client does not exhibit this behavior, so I'm inclined to think it's a BSD Samba client problem.
Well, which Samba client is he? Oh, he's using the built-in one. Okay.
Yeah, sounds like that. Yep, there it is, mount SMBFS. Mm-hmm. He said this only seems to affect Samba. It does not seem to affect NFS. I don't want to use NFS, however, as this makes permission management a real pain. An example of the problem is below. Thanks for the show and keep up the great work.
So the biggest thing to realize is that it's showing up as December 31st, 1969, more than likely means that it's ending up as a value of either -1, which because 0 in Unix time is January 1st, 1970. So it's either ending up as -1 or ending up as -500 or 5 hours, being the time zone difference that you have. But somehow the time is coming across as 0 and then, or -1. I'd have to look into that. I've never noticed that when I use Mount SMBFS.
I've never seen that either. Never noticed the times being out of whack like that.
Did he mention where the share is coming from? He mentioned both having a FreeNAS and a Synology, so he didn't say which one it was. But in the end...
He said he tested mounting it from a FreeNAS box and a Synology server. So I guess regardless of which server is serving it, he's still getting this time discrepancy.
I'm not sure what's happening there, honestly.
Let me look at something here. I don't know if he's not doing anything with locales. I don't think that would make a difference.
Mm-hmm. It seems like it's thanks to dates invalid and it's coming back as -1, and so it displays weirdly. But I don't know what would cause that.
That's a good question. If anybody else has run into that, let us know, because this is...
I'll have to...
I don't recall ever seeing this before.
Although I don't know that it should really cause any problems with any of his software.
Well, he said it was causing some of his applications to act a little funky. They're probably looking at the files and going, "Ooh, this is way out of date."
Well, I guess the other question is, does the music inside that directory have the correct dates on it? Like, is everything wrong, or is it only the root of the mount point that's wrong?
Yeah, that is true. And can you change the date after the fact? Like, if you touch a file, what happens? Does it just error out, or does the date actually change? That would be interesting to see.
Oh, it looks like the guy in the chat room is the guy asking the question.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the big thing is that Mount SMBFS in FreeBSD is not Samba. It's part of FreeBSD. So it's hard to say. And when he tries to go into the directory and touch it, he gets a bad file descriptor.
Oh, that's odd. And I wonder if it's using the newer version of Samba that the sharers are, and maybe the older version, the base system's like confused. Wonder if installing the package for Samba and using a different mount.
Well, the Samba server package doesn't actually provide something that can mount. Is it?
Yeah, there's not a client, is there? Huh.
I don't know. Well, I think there's a client, but is this like a command line client that lets you like look at the files and maybe copy them, but not like browse them as a file system?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'll have to look at that one more. If anybody knows, do write in. But if not, please. I'll maybe have a look.
That's definitely a weird one. Okay, so next up is Mike. He says, "I've been thinking about using my pfSense and DigitalOcean as my personal VPN service. What do you think about using DO as my VPN connection, and would the basic service provide enough resources for browsing? Also, is it possible to set up a pfSense appliance to only route HTTP traffic through the VPN and allow all gaming traffic to be routed without being encapsulated in the VPN?" I'm sure you can do anything in PF, right?
Yeah, I think you can make rules like that. You should be able to. So for DigitalOcean, yes, even the $5 one, because you're getting a gigabit connection and a terabyte of transfer, you should have plenty. You're not going to need that much CPU to just route packets. And do remember that a terabyte of transfer will get used up faster, because if you're, say, downloading something, a website over the VPN, that's, a megabyte comes into the VM, and then that megabyte has to go back out to you. So that will have used 2 megabytes of data from the VM. But even that's usually, not many people really go through 500 gigabytes a month of data on their home connection. So it should work great as a VPN.
Pick one that's close to you.
Yeah, and that's the other nice thing with DigitalOcean is you can pick a location close to you to do it from, so that you have the lower latency. Although you can also decide to pick somewhere further away if you want to appear that you're not where you are. You could pick their data center in London, and maybe then the iPlayer would work. I didn't say that.
No,
and then so pfSense, I'm pretty sure it's possible to set a PF rule where basically connections to a certain place will use a different default gateway to get out. It's called policy-based routing. You can look at it. I've done something similar when I had my cable still, when I had first got the fiber. And because my fiber makes it look like I'm in the US, it was blocking me from watching, or not me, my girlfriend from watching the Soccer World Cup or something on the CBC's website, because it's like, sorry, you're not from Canada, you can't watch that here. Sure. Which confused her. And then I had to try to set policy-based strategies. The TV machine should go out through the cable, not through the fiber, so that it appears to be in the right country, so that the soccer will play on the TV. But yeah, should all be doable.
Okay. Well, cool. Lastly, we have Anders who writes in. He says, hi, Alan, Chris, and JT. He said, I'm a longtime FreeBSD user, but decided to give PCBSD a spin on VirtualBox. I want to familiarize myself with it in order to install it on an old ThinkPad laptop for my 3-year-old son who needs a computer with a proper OS. I agree with you. He said, like me, I'd like him to grow up on the command line. Yes, indeed.
It seems to make them understand the computer a lot better.
Yes, other than just running Windows forever. So he says, when I run PC Update Manager or the GUI to upgrade to the latest PCBSD version, the updater runs for about 5 minutes until the VM freezes. He said the only thing that can rectify the situation is a cold reboot of the entire VM. He said what's common each freeze is that the top 10% of the VM screen, see attached, turns into a gray bar with noisy white lines. That is interesting. He said, I thought this might be an X driver or display error relating to the screensaver starting, but if that were true, it shouldn't affect the stability of the whole VM. He said he checked varlog messages, and there's no interesting information in there. Could you kindly help me out as to how to make this VM more stable? That is interesting. If it's locking up like that, I guess I would ask
with graphical corruption.
Yeah, I'm wondering, are you running out of memory? Like RAM? Like how much did you give your VM? First of all, maybe bump that up. Maybe for some reason it is running out of RAM. And
during an update, it is going to be using a lot of ZFS.
It is. The ARC will grow quite a bit. So that would be the first thing I guess I would check. I run my VMs typically with 4 gigs here. I'm maybe 2 in a pinch, but I wouldn't go too much below that if you can help it.
Yeah.
Let's see, other issues. I guess since it's a hard lock, you could check var log. There's a PC update manager.log file, and you could see where it stopped, at what point it was at when it died. Maybe it was just downloading and caching packages at that point still. But I would definitely send that info over. You can email me or send it to our mailing list, or even open a bug report if you'd like, and we'll figure it out. But memory would be my first guess. Make sure you have disk space too, like you're not out of... if you gave it only like 10 gigs or something, maybe you've run out of disk space as well.
I've had that in VirtualBox where I did the thin provision disk, so the disk was big, but it doesn't take up the space until you use it. And I ran out of actual space on the host system, and that would pause the VM, and an error would pop up from VirtualBox being like, hey, before you resume the VM, you might want to free up some disk space, otherwise writes are going to fail.
Yeah. Okay, but yeah, I would definitely check those hardware things, because updating in a VM is not problematic. Since that's how I do most of my tests here. So
yeah,
anyway,
the graphical corruption is, with the top bit of the screen going all corrupt.
Well, typically I only see that when there's a kernel panic, right? If the kernel panics, then you can have all kinds of weird stuff happen on the screen.
Right, and maybe it's not switching back to the console properly.
Yeah.
So I wonder if that is what's happening.
Yeah,
I wonder
that's my
kernel
guess.
panic it would be, though.
Which is why I'm thinking.
It's weird if you don't see the kernel panic. It's hard to do anything about it.
Which is unfortunate. I wish we had something that would kill X and switch over so you'd see that it was a kernel panic. Because 9 times out of 10, when we get these reports of a lockup, it's like it kernel panicked in the background.
If it did, and there's a small chance you might see something if you look in /var/crash, which would have the dump information from the kernel panic if it managed to get some.
Okay. Cool. Well, that's actually the end of all of our questions for this week. So thanks for writing in, everybody. And of course, as we wrap up, we want to remind you, send everything in to feedback@bsdnow.tv. That's the only place we monitor. So send your stories. If you have any comments or questions, show ideas. If you want to schedule an interview, yes, please, please. We would love to schedule more interviews with people. Send that in to feedback@bsdnow.tv, and we'll get a time and date arranged. And heck, we can even write up the questions and kind of figure out what kind of stuff to ask you about too, because maybe we're not an expert in whatever topic you're an expert in. So we'll make this as painless as possible. So definitely get in touch with us at feedback@bsdnow.tv, and we will look forward to speaking to you same time next week.